Now let's continue the discussions, and today we'll be discussing all about planes in space. So in short, kapag meron tayong XYZ plane, you can actually draw a certain plane. So you can see it from the figure yan. Ito, plane yan. So anywhere on the, sa XYZ plane, pwede kang magawa ng certain planes. Pwedeng diagonal yan, or it traverses the XYZ axis, or just the XY axis. So, pwedeng mangyari yung mga yun. And then the general equation for any plane in the XYZ plane is given by this the standard form a times x minus x sub 1 plus b times y minus y sub 1 plus c times z minus z sub 1. Now, itong x sub 1, y sub 1, and then z sub 1, siya yung ating point of reference. So, in short, lahat ng mga vectors natin na gagawin para ma-compute yung or ma-determine yung ating equation will be coming from that point, x1, y1, z1. In general form, we can deduce itong ating standard form. So, we have ax plus by plus cz plus d would be equal to 0. So, ito are planes in space because lahat ng degree ng ating x, y, z ay degree 1. So, if ever na magkaroon dito ng squared or cube or any parang exponent na more than 1, then it is expected na hindi na plane yung ating kakalabasan dyan. So, yun, and this is one of the basic parang equations that we have in XYZ plane. So, kung halimbawa, naalala nyo yung lines sa XY plane, so ito naman parang, since wala naman tayo generaling lines sa XYZ plane kasi 3D siya, so ito na yung pinaka-base natin, mga planes in space. Okay, so ano bang gagawin natin? We have to determine lagi yung ating tinatawag na normal vector, that is simply yung ating n, which can be represented by the form of the equation of the plane. So, ito yon, ito yung n natin. This is the normal vector dun sa ating planes of space. So, kapag meron kayong plane, any vector na dinraw mo dyan perpendicular to that plane, so yun yung ating natawag na normal vector. And sabi dito, the normal vector n is orthogonal to each vector pq on the plane. So yun, and then we can now solve for an example here. Sabi dito, obtain the equation in standard and general form for a plane with points. So ito yung 3 points natin na we have to generate yung equation. So, in short, itong tatlong points na ito, naglalayan dun sa same plane na ating ma-generate. So, how do we determine that? You can always set muna yung ating reference. Yun yung parang first natin step. So, yung reference natin would, usually, it's the first point. So, di ba, if I name this points A, B, and C, so ito yung gawin natin na reference point, point A. So, from this, you need to determine yung ating two vectors, U and then V. So, of course, ito naman mga vector na to, pwedeng maging iba yung kanilang name, depende kung anong gusto nyo. Pero usually, we represent it as U and V. So, the first vector that we have is the U. So, this is simply yung parang direction numbers natin with regards to B and A. And then this V would be C and A. So, therefore, kung reference mo is A, so that's 4 minus 1. And then, comma, 2 minus negative 3. So, 2 plus 3. And then, negative 3 minus 2. So, this gives us the value of 3, 5, and then negative 5. Okay. So, this is the direction numbers for our U vector. And then, the second one, so, ito is A and B. So, yun namang ating V would be A and C. So, for C, we have negative 2 minus 1, 0, plus 3, and then negative 4 minus 2. So therefore, the direction numbers for our V vector would be negative 3, positive 3, and then negative 6. Okay, so with all these values, U and V, we can now proceed with the cross product of our normal vector. So our normal vector n can be determined by the cross product of the two vectors that we've already previously obtained. So, by cross product, we mean na this is the determinant of I, J, K, and then yung ating mga row vectors, uunahin natin itong U and then V. So, ano ba yung U? So, pag cross product, kung ano man yung nauna dito, yung first row niya, yun din yung una, ay yung row niya mismo yung unahin mo. Ang sinasabi nating row, ito yung mga elements ng kanyang matrix na yon. So, 3, 5, negative 5. So, you write 3, 5, negative 5, and then negative 3, 3, negative 6. So, yun. Just determine the determinant of this expression. So, again, the first step is to determine yung ating reference. Then, the second step would be determining the direction numbers based on the reference point. So, we have two of them kasi tatlo yung points natin. And then, finally, we can determine yung ating cross product of our two vectors, which is generally referred to as the normal vector. So in this case, determining the determinant. So to find the determinant from this case, so hopefully tandaan nyo pa, or kung hindi nyo tandaan nyo pa yung ating paghanap ng curl, diba? That's finding the determinant. So if not, then we can have a lot of options to do here. Pwede tayong gumamit ng Sarus rule or triangles rule to find the determinant. I think the easiest one would be the Sarus rule na lang. So let's have it here para mahanap ang determinant. So again, yung determinant, ito yung designation niya, no? Parang absolute value siya. So whenever you have that certain absolute value symbol dun sa matrix nyo, so you have to expect na you need to determine the determinant. So by using Sarus rule, you just have to copy yung original. So ijk, and then 3, 5, negative 5, and then 3, negative 3, positive 3, negative 6. And then, replicate nyo ngayon yung first two columns natin. So, pag column, ito yon. So, I, 3, negative 3, and then J, 5, positive 3. Okay, so after reflecting yung ating, or rewriting yung two columns natin, so dalawa lang, and then magdodraw kayo ngayon ng mga diagonal lines. So, yung diagonal lines na magko-cross, or yung entries na i-cross ng diagonal lines na papunta from the upper left going to downwards right. So, lahat yon ay positive, or i-add lahat natin. So, in short, multiply nyo yung kada entries and then i-add natin. So, we have I times 5 times 6, then plus J times negative 5 times negative 3 plus K times 3 times 3. Okay, and then lahat naman, so tapos na kayo dun kasi tatlong lang yan, diagonals. And then lahat naman ng pataas sa diagonal from the lower left going to the upper right would be minus or subtracted from the original. So yon, this one and then this one. So therefore, we have minus, so minus 3 times 5 times K. So pwede ko na itong i-add kasi may minus na ako dun sa labas nung whole expression. So I have 3 negative 5 times I, and then finally we have plus negative 6 times 3 times J. Okay, and then if you take all of these, yung sum nila, so mga palabas natin is this negative 15i 33j plus 24k. So hopefully kayo na lang mag-evaluate yan. Madali lang naman yan. Multiply lang yan and then add. Tapos combine like terms. So upon solving for negative 15i plus 33j plus 24k, so therefore itong mga values natin nung ating n, so we have n that is equal to negative 15i, okay, plus 33j plus 24k. So, ito na yung mga coefficients ng ating mga ijk. So, ang ijk natin para siyang direction natin yan sa ating xyz plane. So, parang for every x coordinate, meron tayong parang negative 15 units, parang ganun. So, from this, yung ating values ng a would be negative 15, b is equal to positive 33, and then c would be equal to 24. So, these are your a, b, c. So, yon. And then, sabi natin, to determine the final equation of the in terms of xyz, so we have, sabi natin before, we have x minus x sub 1 a plus b y minus y sub 1 plus c, and then x minus x sub 1 equal to 0. So we'll be applying this concept in our solution. So we have ano ba yung a natin? That's negative 15. So lipat lang ako ng sheet. Okay, so from this, ano ba yung ating values? So we have a, that's negative 15 times x. Ano ba yung x sub 1 natin? So yung reference natin na values, diba, it's negative 1, 3, and negative 2. So that's negative 1. And then, actually that's positive 1 pala. So yung a natin, point A is 1, negative 3, and then positive 2. So that's x minus 1, and then plus, ano ba yung b? 33. So that's y, and then plus 3, and then we have plus 24, and then yung ating z would be minus 2. That's equal to 0. And then we can now actually simplify further kasi pwede natin itong i-divide all by 3. So we have negative 5 times x minus 1, 11, y plus 3, and then plus 8 and then z minus 2 is equal to 0. So this is a simplified version in standard form. So you can report this as your answer in standard form. But if you want to have it in the general form, so you can actually distribute all of this and then just simplify. So you have negative 5x and then plus 5 plus 11y plus 33 plus 8z minus 16, which is equal to 0. And then we have negative 5x plus 11y plus 8z, and then 5 plus 33, that's 38, and then minus 16, so that gives us 22 equal to 0. So therefore, the final answers for this case would be this general form and then the standard, this standard form and then the general form, as you can see. And hopefully you could check yun sa inyong handout kasi binago ko rin yan. Kasi parang mali yung na-add dito sa part ng matrix na determinant. So yun, ito yung ating plane. So therefore, if you want to see it first hand in the GeoGebra, so this is what it looks like. So, burahin ko na lahat tong mga to. Okay, so yan. This is the X, Y, Z plane. And ito yung mga points natin, points A, B, and C. So, ito yung A, B, and then C. And then this is the plane na na-generate natin. So, ito medyo. So, kung gusto nyo makita ito, rotate natin. Okay, so, kita nyo naman na yung ating points A, B, and C, naglalay siya dito sa plane natin na negative 5x plus 11y plus 8z plus 22. Okay, so yan. Ganon nagsosolve ng ating planes in space. So, in short, lahat na mapaproduce nyo, basta sila is in first order, lahat would be planes. So, pwede kayong makapag-produce ng mga planes na ganyan, okay, or mga ganyan. Basta planes lang lahat sila, no? Wag muna kayo mag-expect ng mga surfaces natin na hindi planes kasi X, Y, Z lang tayo in the first order. Okay, so I think we can now proceed dun sa next natin na part, which is all about the sketching planes in space. So ito naman, sketching planes in space, napakasimple lang nito. Once you are given with 3 points, you can generally sketch the plane. Or kung wala kayong given na 3 points, pwede kayong basta mag-assign ng any values. Let's say gawin mong 0, 0 yung the rest, and then magkakaroon ka ng values ng isa. So ganun lang nag-sketch ng planes in space. So ito, hindi ko na masyado to i-detail na discussion kasi hindi naman tayo mag-i-sketch kasi online naman to eh. So pwede kayo laging gumamit ng mga tools para makita yung tsura ng mga planes in space natin. But generally, this is the concept, no? If you have points na 3 points technically na ginawa mo, you can just connect them all. So paano makagawa ka ng triangle? But the triangle is not actually the figure but plane ang ating figure talaga dyan. So generally the figure would look something like this. So yan. So basta yung plane na yan, ito kasi yung plane na yan. So sinasakop niya tong points na to. So kung ititilt mo yan, so makikita mo lang itong thin sheet na to, and then yung points na yan would be lying somewhere here. So hopefully na-visualize nyo kasi medyo mahirap explain sa 2D drawing yung ating mga 3D. But the concept is ganun lang yan, just plot it. Pero sabi ko nga, hindi naman natin ito masyado i-detail. Wala rin akong i-indicate na mga problem solving for sketching. Just parang aralin nyo na lang yung concept nito. And incorporated doon, syempre, yung surface tracing. So, ito na yung mga tinatawag natin na quadric surfaces. Kasi, sabi ko nga kanina, lahat ng napag-aralan natin in planes in space ay in terms of first order ng ating X, Y, Z. So, lahat ng equation natin is planes ang mabubuo. Pero what if meron tayong certain, let's say, an equation wherein yung ating X or is naka-squared, yung ating Y naka-squared or Z naka-squared, or pwedeng dalawa lang doon or pwedeng isa lang. So what happens with the surface? So the surfaces that we will be talking starting from here would be quadratic surface. That means at least one variable is naka-square. So yun. And as you can see, pag sinabi natin sphere, ayun, lahat naka-square sila. So parang ganun na ganyan yung concept pagka lahat naka-square. Quadratic surface, so ito yon. This is the general equation of a quadratic surface in the second degree in 3 variables. So ax squared plus by squared plus cz squared. So you have to expect expect that kasi naka-square na lahat. And then dxy plus ex plus fyz. So ito lahat yung ating mga naka-multiply individually sila sa bawat variables, and then gx, hy, iz. So ito yung parang linear component niya, and then j would be the constant. So ito yung 6 basic types natin ng quadratic surface. So generally ito lang nagfo-fall lahat ng ating mga quadric surfaces, no, or any equation na naka second degree. So from the ellipse concept natin sa xy plane, so imagine nyo nagkaroon nyo ng volume since 3D to, so nagkaroon tayo ng ellipsoid. And then from the concept of hyperbola, kasi 'di ba meron tayong dalawang 'di ba usually meron tayong two parts ng hyperbola, opens upward, downward, or left and right. So dito kasi minsan isang sheet lang 'yung nangyayari kasi hindi na nag-open yung isa. Kasi by virtue of the nature of the 3D plane, so pwedeng isa lang yan. So we call that the hyperboloid of one sheet, pero kung 2 sheets siya, hyperboloid of 2 sheets. So meron din tayong tinatawag na elliptic cone or the elliptic paraboloid and hyperbolic paraboloid. So para silang combination ng mga ellipse and then parabola or hyperbola and then parabola. So ganun yung naging natin, quadric surface. Tapos yung intersection of the surface with the plane is called the trace of the surface of the plane. So mamaya makikita niyo siya yung yung pinaka-concept nitong mga trace. Pero in short, 'di ba, before meron tayong mga conics. So 'di ba yung conics na yun, yung trace nun kapag slash tayo ng isang 'di ba may axis yun and then in-slash natin yung plane. So yung mga plane na yun, usually yun yung tinatawag na trace. So dito gagawin natin is itatabulate natin para mas makita nyo. So from the ellipse natin na concept sa xy plane, meron tayong ellipsoid ngayon. So nadagdag lang sa kanilang component is itong z squared and then over c squared, 'di ba? Kasi before pag ellipse, ito lang yan. So ngayon, dadagdagan natin ng pa-third natin na variable, which is this one. Ang sabi dito, the ellipsoid has a plane that can be parallel to xy plane, xz, or yz. So in short, kahit saan siya mag-lie, pwedeng sa z, sa x, o y, so any plane. Pero ang kanyang trace, you can have the xz trace, the yz trace, and then the xy trace. So ang ating mga planes, hindi lang, porket, halimbawa, may isa tayong ellipsoid, hindi ibig sabihin yan, isa lang yung trace yan. There could be more than one traces. So, for example, meron siyang YZ, meron siyang XZ, and of course, meron din siyang XY trace. So, ito, sinabi dito that surface is a sphere when A is equal to B is equal to C and it is not equal to 0. So, alam naman siguro natin na kapag, 'di ba yung ellipse natin, kapag equal yung ating A and B, 'di ba, it forms a circle. So this is the same concept for ellipsoid. If A, B, and C are equal, then therefore we're forming a sphere here and not actually the ellipse kasi nagiging circular na yung kanyang pinaka-trace at any plane. So, the next one is the hyperboloid of one sheet. So, ibig sabihin nito, isang sheet lang yung ating nabubuo dito. So, you can see the one sheet here. So, ito lang yun. Ayan. Kasi, ito yung two sheets. Naghihiwalay talaga sila, no? Ito yung one sheet, diretso lang siya. So, yun. The hyperboloid of one sheet has this equation. So, you have to expect na meron dyang subtraction kasi meron tayong hyperboloid of hyperboloid or parang hyperbola. Diba sa concept natin ng hyperbola, meron tayong parang subtraction lagi. So, from this case, ang pinapag-add natin is yung x squared, y squared, pero isinusubtract natin ngayon yung ating z squared, which is equal to 1. So, the trace of the hyperboloid, kapag parallel siya sa xy plane, so ito yung trace niya. So, di ba pag xy plane, ito yon, ang trace niya is an ellipse. So, parang magpapasok kayo ng plane dyan, tapos kung anong kakalabasan na figure yun. So, di ba pag ganon, you have an ellipse. Pero pag naman paparallel sa xz or yz, you'll be getting this hyperbola. Kaya tinawag siya hyperboloid of one sheet. So, parang dalawang hyperbola for the yz and then the xz plane, and then an ellipse for the xy plane. So, the axis of the hyperboloid corresponds to the variable whose coefficient is negative. So, for example, ang ating hyperboloid of one sheet is negative yung y. So, we have x squared over a squared, then minus y squared over b squared plus z squared over c squared is equal to 1. So, upon finding the trace, we could determine that the ellipse, so ano ba yung parallel ngayon to xy plane? So, halimbawa, meron tayong ditong z and then x and then y. So, this is x, y, and then z. So, So sabi natin, kung nasaan yung negative na coefficient, nandun yung axis ng hyperboloid. So therefore, kung this is y, so ganito yung tsura niya. So hopefully, madrawing ko ng tama. Parang ganyan siya. Yan. Okay? So, yan, parang ganyan yung hyperboloid kung nasa sa y-axis siya. So, therefore, ano tong mapoproduce natin na trace parallel to the xz plane. So, therefore, for the xz plane, so we have an ellipse. Okay, so sa xz plane siya. And then, ano naman yung hyperbola? So, yung hyperbola, it could either be the xy or the yz plane. So, yan yung ating magiging hyperbola. So, ganun lang yun sa ating hyperboloid. Kung nasan yung negative, nandun yung ating axis ng ating hyperboloid of one sheet. So, again, yung one sheet is dire-diretso. Pero what if nagkaroon tayo ng putol? So, we call that the hyperboloid of two sheets. And usually, this has two negative na parang parts in standard form. Ito sinabi dito, the axis of the hyperboloid corresponds to the variable whose coefficient is positive. There is no trace in the coordinate plane perpendicular to the axis. So, ganito yung yung scenario. Pagka hyperboloid of one sheet, diba, the trace is on the negative part ng variable. Pero pag naman hyperboloid of two sheets, kung nasan yung positive, nandun ang trace. So, in this case, or nandun yung axis. So, in this case, since ang positive is z, so you have to expect na yung ating hyperboloid of two sheets is oriented dun sa ating z-axis. So, halimbawa naman, let's have x squared over a squared minus z squared over c squared minus y squared over b squared. So, for example, ganyan yung ating hyperboloid of two sheets. So, this is your xyz. So, ano ba yung positive dito? That's x. Therefore, the hyperboloid is oriented sa x-axis. So, ganito siya pag nakita natin. So, parang ganyan. Hopefully na visualize nyo yung gusto kong i-portray na concept. So, ganyan siya. And then, ito yung parang medyo may area yan. So, yan. Ganyan yung ating hyperboloid of two sheets kung siya is nasa x-axis. And sabi dito, there is no trace in the coordinate plane perpendicular to the axis. So, ano ba yung perpendicular dito sa ating axis na to? So, yung pinakamadaling indicator dyan, di ba for this case, yung ating axis is the z-axis. So, ano ba yung natirang axis? X and y axis. So, any trace dun sa plane na xy, so, wala ka ng trace dun kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng parang singularity dito, parang point. So, from this case, di ba this is x. X yung kanyang axis. Ano ba yung natira? Y and z. So, as you can see, the yz plane, so parang itong portion na to, wala ka na dyan makitang trace. Okay? Kasi nagkakaroon dito ng parang critical point. So, therefore, for our x, wala tayong trace sa yz plane. Pero, if you move further, let's say dito, nag-trace ako ng plane across this part. So, makakita nyo na meron pa rin dyan na buong ellipse. So, therefore, dito, ang ellipse natin would also be located at the yz plane. Okay? Pero mismo dun sa perpendicular na, dun sa parang midpoint nila mismo, wala siyang trace dun sa pagitan ng dalawang yan. So, okay, mag-expect na may makukuha kayong trace dun. And then, hyperbola. So, ang hyperbola man is yung natira na lang. So, we have, ano ba natira? So, xy and then y. xy and then xz. Okay? So, ganun yung ating hyperboloid of two sheets. So, expect nyo lang na pag positive, edi dun yung ating trace, and then dun sa pagitan ng or dun sa space between these two sheets, so wala tayong trace dun. Unlike this hyperboloid na meron lagi tayong trace whenever we have yung ating mga any planes na you can incorporate here. So, how about the elliptic cone? So, elliptic cone naman is kapag meron tayong x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared minus z squared over c squared, pero the equivalent is 0. Yung kanina kasi, hyperboloid of one sheet, equal siya sa 1. So, pag naman ang atin is equal to 0, so you have to expect na the moment na nagkaroon dito ng parang value, so medyo lumalaki ito, nagkakaroon tayo ng protrusion ng ellipse. Pero, after some value na nag-0 siya, so anong nangyayari doon? Parang nasisiksik yung ating hyperboloid of two sheets into parang single point dito na nagmi-meet na yung dalawang yun. So, technically, nawawala yung a certain point na yan. So, meron tayong trace dun sa point na yun, pero isa lang siya. Parang xy trace mo dun is 1 point lang. And then, you can also trace naman sa the rest. So, pag sinabi natin trace, again, you parang draw a plane perpendicular to that part. So, ito, pag nagawa tayo ng plane dito, diba? So, you can see na meron tayong parang ellipse dito. Okay, and you can go down up until this point, pero dito sa point na to, mayroon lang tayong 1 point. So, parang, hindi talaga siya, hindi talaga siya plane, but a point. Okay, so ito lang din yun, and then hyperbola na rin sa rest. So, sabi dito, the axis of the cone corresponds to the variable whose coefficient is negative, same lang ng hyperboloid of one sheet, and then the traces in the coordinate planes parallel to this axis are intersecting lines. So, don't worry, hindi ko naman kayo ipapag-drawingin ng mga ganyang quadric surface. So, usually, ang mga kasama lang dyan kung may exam is determine if this is a hyperboloid of one sheet or classify siguro yung equation. So, ganun lang naman. And then, we're down to the last two and the elliptic paraboloid. So, this is this equation kapag wala tayong coefficient or pag wala tayong c squared or our c squared is equal to 1. So, you have to expect na parang parabola lang siya. Kasi diba, tandaan nyo yung parabola natin. Usually, meron tayong isang squared and then may isa tayong linear. So, dito gagawin natin, yung dalawa, naka-square pa rin sila, pero yung isa matitira as a linear. So, z is equal to x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared. So, you have to expect na kung ano yung walang degree 2, so, or kung ano yung nasa first order, first power, yun yung kanyang axis. So, in this case, yun yung axis niya. So, as you can see, this is the z, so the trace is along the positive z axis. So, this is the yz trace and then this xz trace. So, yung trace again, basta nag-drawing lang kayo ng parallel plane to that coordinate axis. Okay, and then lastly, we have the hyperbolic paraboloid. So, ito na yung kapag, di ba meron tayong plus dito. So, pag pinag-minus naman natin, ano yung kakalabasan? So, mapansin nyo, pag para tong puzzle, pag dinikit nyo to dito, yung cavity nito, di ba, magmi-meet siya doon. So, technically, that's why yung hyperbolic paraboloid is parang parang opposite siya nung elliptic paraboloid. So, parang, since ang elliptic paraboloid, papaganyan siya, so you have to explain na parang makakabuo tayo ng hyperboloid dito. Pero in this case kasi, yung ating equation is that dalawa yung second degree din, may isang first degree, pero subtraction yung namamagitan sa kanilang operation. And then the trace here is of course same lang din nung elliptic paraboloid na nasa first degree na variable natin. So for this case, diba, parallel yung atin sa z-plane. So you can just determine that based on this parang parabola na yan. So, di ba ito yung parang parabola and it is along the z-axis. So, yun yung naging indicator niya. Wala tayong trace na ellipse kasi this is hyperbolic paraboloid. So, meron lang tayong hyperbola, parabola, and then parabola. So, if you be looking at the xy plane, so this is the x and then this is the y plane. So, whenever you try to draw a plane there, so you'll be getting this part. So, pag ganyan siya, and then ito. So, you can see that that's a hyperbola, but if you want to cross it somewhere here, let's say along the zy plane, so ito yon yung plane na yon. So the zy plane will give you this trace. Okay, so ito yon, and then this trace, diba? This is a parabola, part of the parabola actually. Kaya yon, any parts there would give you a parabola. And I think that's all for the quadric surface na we have 6 of them, and then in the exam, you will be tasked to identify what type of quadric surface is the equation based on the standard form of these quadric surfaces. Okay, and I think ito na yon, identify the quadric surface with an equation. So ito yon, and then determine the axis as well as the traces. So you just have to make this in the standard form. So pwede mo siyang ilipat yung coefficient and then divide mo siya dun sa mismong coefficient. Ito ang ginawa dito is dinivide na siya agad by 6. So, sinimplify in terms of ganito, 2/3 and then minus 1. And then, nilipat natin yung 1. So, z squared over 3 minus minus minus. So, ano ba yung equation na to since meron tayong dalawang minus? So, you have to expect na this is a hyperboloid of 2 sheets kasi meron tayong dalawang minus and then yung ating axis dito is nasa positive. So, ito yun, z is the positive variable, so z is the axis. And then, yung traces natin, for this case, the xy plane has no trace kasi alam natin this is hyperboloid of 2 sheets. And then, the traces of the xy plane is ito yun. So, you can have the traces kapag sinet mo yung x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 0. So pag sinet natin x it is equal to 0, and pakakalabasan natin is z squared over 3 minus y squared over 3 over 4, which is equal to 1. So that is your first trace. So gawin natin na lang dito since di pa tayo nagsosolve ng trace. So yung trace, if you want to determine the trace on the YZ plane, so pag YZ plane, ano yung natira dito? So x na lang. So you set x equal to 0. So for this, we have z squared over 3 minus 0 minus y squared over 3 fourths, which is equal to 1. And this is your trace, z squared over 3 minus y squared over 3 fourths is equal to 1. So how about kung gusto nyo hanapin yung trace ng ating xz? So sa xz plane, so you just have to set yung ating y is equal to 0. So therefore, z squared over 3 and then minus x squared over 3 halves is equal to 1. So yung ating z is the axis, so wala tayong trace dun sa ating xy plane. Supposedly kasi isaset mo yan z is equal to 0. Pero yun nga, since wala namang values dun, so wala ka makukuhang trace in that case. So yun, ganun lang yung paghahanap ng trace natin. So this is the trace for xy and this is the trace for your xz. Okay, so that's it for the quadric surfaces. And this is the figure of that certain quadric surface. Okay, so now we're down with the last special type of surface. And this is the fifth one. So we have the surface of revolution. So mamaya i-recap natin yung mga mga types of surfaces na napag-aralan kanina. So let us consider a graph of the radius function y is equal to rz in the yz plane. So if I have an xyz plane here, and this is the yz plane. So example, I have a certain graph. Let's say ito yon. Okay? And then I want to revolve this about the z-axis. So technically, i-revolve yan. So therefore, makakagawa tayo ng parang circle dyan. So matatrace niyan ito up until makagawa tayo ng certain figure. So basically, ganyan yung mangyayari. And then sabi natin, when the graph is revolved about the z-axis, the surface of revolution or the trace of the surface of revolution on this z is actually circle. So tama naman kasi pabilog lang yung revolution natin eh. So therefore, kung circle yon, we could generalize that the equation for this circle would be x squared plus y squared is equal to the radius squared, which in this case, yung ating radius squared is simply given by the equation itself whose expression is r and then z sub o, which in turn yung z sub o natin is equal to z. So in short, we can generalize all the formulas as follow. If any surface is revolved about the x-axis, then yung ating maging formula is y squared plus z squared is equal to r of x. Kapag y-axis x squared plus z squared and pag z-axis x squared plus y squared. So mapapansin nyo, the axis of revolution, kung ano man yung axis of revolution dito, hindi natin nakikita yung variable na dito, but rather, dito siya lalabas sa expression ng radius or radial distance niya, no? For example, itong z, so x and y lang to, and then dito yung ating z. So hopefully nakita nyo yung pattern in that case. So let's have this example. We need to find the equation of the surface revolve about the z-axis. So this one is z-axis, so we have to, we already is sure na meron tayong x squared plus y squared. And then we have to express that in terms of r, z, and then squared. So kailangan natin ngayon hanapin yung ating r of z. So r of z is equal to this expression. So paano ba natin ito hahanapin? So it's just the expression of our radius in terms of z. So with this, you can just take the natural logarithm of both sides. So we have ln of e raised to x squared is equal to ln of z plus ln of z. Okay, and then we can perform the property. So we have x squared that's equal to ln of z plus ln of z. Yeah, that's it for our expression. And therefore, if we want to have it as our x, so square root lang nitong ating ln of z plus ln of z. But again, since kailangan natin this r of z squared, so kahit ito na lang gamitin natin kasi naka-square na siya. So therefore, our r of z squared would be equal to ln of z plus ln of z. So therefore, the answer here would be equal to x squared plus y squared is equal to ln of z plus ln of z squared, z. Yeah. So, ito na yung ating magiging sagot for this expression. So ano ba yung kailangan natin ditong tandaan? So, actually, you just have to determine yung inyong R based on the variable that you need. Let's say, for example, R of Z, R of X, and then R of Y. And then, ina-assume natin na yung itong X squared na to is equal to ln of Z plus ln of Z. This is actually the distance na ng ating radial distance. So, parang sinabi natin na yung R of X natin. So, dito sa ating expression na to, yung ating X squared or yung ating X, inassume natin na ng ating R of Z is equal to R of X. Para ma-consider natin na yung R of Z would be, of course, R of X. So, syempre, this is a very hypothetical problem dun sa ating R of X. Kasi since it's quite impossible na hindi tayo magkaroon ng assumption na yun yung ating R of Z kasi na equal silang dalawa kasi nga di natin siya masosolve kung wala. So, therefore, our assumption is that yung ating R of Z is equal to R of X. Pero, this radial distance is simply yung ating, meron tayong X and Z. So, parang, kung ano ba, meron tayong graph dito. Itong X and Z is actually a graph that is existing dito sa ating X and Z plane. So, parang ganyan siya, no? And then, ni-revolve natin siya about the Z axis. So, ganyan. So, you have to expect na yung radial distance ito is just the measurement of this point from point Z to whatever value is this for the X. So, that's the R of Z. And then, di ba, meron tong X value which is just this Z. So, pwede mo siyang gamitin literally. So, paikot lang siya. Okay, so that's it for this problem. Actually, pwede rin niya na na Y. So, kung Y, lilipat lang siya sa kabila. But the concept is just you use the variable ng R of that certain variable na radial distance siya. And then, kung ano man yung variable na pinapag-ikutan natin, pinapag-rotate natin, siya yung i-square natin dapat yung kanyang equation. And then, remember, kung ano man yung axis of revolution natin, you have to expect na siya yung magiging radial distance natin. So, for example, kung Z siya, dapat R of Z din to. And then, kung Y naman, so dapat R of Y din. So, you have to make sure of that certain condition. So, tapos na pala tayo, meron tayong multiple integration na sasunod. So, since tapos na tayo, let's have a recap of the surfaces na pinag-usapan natin, no? So, yung number 1 is we have the plane surface. So, pag sinabi nating plane lang yung surface natin, you have to expect na yung ating equation would be AX plus BY plus CZ plus D is equal to 0. So, this is general form. Lahat ng X, Y, Z natin, of course, ito yung mga variables natin. So, lahat sila is in the first degree. So, yung second one naman natin is sphere. So, pag sinabi natin na sphere, ito yung feel ko kauna ko tatatong diniscuss. So, pag sinabi natin na sphere, meron tayong ax squared plus by squared plus cz squared plus d is equal to 0. Pero in this case, a is equal to b is equal to c. So, this is your sphere. And then, for number 3, ito yung hindi ko ata nasabi, we have a cylinder or something like cylindrical sheet. So, pag cylinder naman, from the sphere, kapag ang isa nating coefficient is 0, so mawawala yung isang yun. So basically, the cylinder could be ax squared plus by squared plus cz squared plus d is equal to 0. Pero, we have to expect na if a is equal to 0, then b and c should not be equal to 0. And then, so ganun na. If b is equal to 0, then a and c should not be equal to 0. And then, if c is equal to 0, then a and b should not be equal to 0. So, ito yung ating cylinder formula. And then, for number 4, we have the quadric surfaces. So, yung quadric surfaces naman, di ko na sila isa-isa. And so, we have 5 of them. So, A to F to. And then, for number 5 is yung last one na diniscuss natin, which is the surface of revolution. So, the surface of revolution, any equation na hindi na nagsasatisfy dito, so halimbawa, ang equation mo is x squared plus 4y squared plus 3 ln of z squared. So, yung mga ganyang equation. So, diba, these are combinations na ng ating iba't ibang types of elementary functions. So, in this case, we can call that the surface of revolution kasi hindi sila nagpo-fall under this any 4 of the previously mentioned surfaces or special type of surfaces. Okay, so those are the surfaces, and then remember, ang sinosolve lang natin dito before is plane surfaces, okay? and then the determining or just finding the traces, and then the traces at saka yung mga redefining the equation of the quadratic surface para ma-classify natin. So yun yung ginagawa lang natin dito. And basically, the surface of revolution, of course, finding the equation of the surface of revolution. Itong sphere and cylinder, so in-skip na natin to kasi common na kasi sila nag-exist. Basta nakita nyo lang itong condition na to, A, B is equal to C, or these conditions, then you can just simply say na, oh, sphere yun, cylinder yun. Okay, so ito yung 1, 4, 5 natin, yung para mas kailangan natin pagtuunan ng pansin. Okay, so from that, I think we can now move forward na sa next major topic, which is all about these multiple integration in 3D. We have a double and triple integrals.